On the night of the 21st of October 2025, at around 9:45 p.m., gang intelligence officers in Detroit, Michigan, were conducting routine patrol in the area of 7 Mile and Gratiot. While traveling westbound on 7 Mile, their attention was drawn to a vehicle approaching them. The officers illuminated the vehicle with their spotlight to observe it more clearly. After doing so, they made a U-turn and began traveling eastbound on 7 Mile to investigate the vehicle further. Almost immediately, the officers witnessed multiple traffic violations. The driver failed to yield to cross traffic that had the right-of-way and did not stop before the limit line. She then made a right turn against a red light, nearly causing a collision with southbound traffic on Gratiot. These unsafe movements indicated careless driving and created a significant hazard for other motorists. As officers closed distance from behind the vehicle, they also observed an obstructed license plate, adding another violation to the growing list. At this point, the officers activated their lights and initiated a traffic stop at the corner of Gratiot and 7 Mile. The vehicle pulled into the drive-through lane of a nearby business, and the officers positioned themselves behind it. All 4 officers exited their patrol unit to conduct the stop. Officer B made contact with the driver of the black Impala. He requested her driver's license, registration, and proof of insurance. Instead of a driver's license, she handed him a state identification card. Officer B continued the standard procedure by asking whether there were any weapons inside the vehicle. The driver said she was unsure and turned to ask the other occupants if they had weapons. None responded. Officer B then asked the driver if she would consent to a search of the vehicle for weapons. She agreed. Officer B instructed her to step out of the car. While doing so, he redirected the rear passenger who had stopped complying with commands to keep his hands visible. Officer A, positioned on the passenger side, learned from his partner that all occupants would be stepping out of the vehicle. Officer A removed the front passenger and directed him toward the rear, near the officer's scout car. At the same time, a sudden confrontation began on the opposite side of the vehicle between Officer B and the rear passenger. Officer A immediately moved around the car to assist. This moment marked the transition from a routine traffic stop into a rapidly escalating encounter. As Officer A approached the other side of the vehicle to assist Officer B, the rear passenger had already begun resisting. When officers attempted to turn him around and place his hands behind his back, the subject refused to comply and physically pulled away. The officers were attempting to maintain control, but the confined space of the drive-through lane and the subject's sudden resistance created immediate complications. Officer B drew his taser and attempted to deploy it in an effort to bring the subject into compliance. However, the taser deployment was ineffective. The subject continued resisting and twisting his body, making it difficult for officers to control his movements. The failed deployment increased the urgency of the situation as the subject's resistance was becoming more aggressive. During the struggle, the danger escalated dramatically. The subject made an attempt to grab Officer A's firearm. Any attempt by a suspect to gain control of an officer's weapon introduces an immediate and serious threat, not only to the officers, but to everyone in the surrounding area. The officers tried to maintain control, but the subject managed to wedge himself between Officer A and Officer B, slipping through the narrow gap created by the open door. With that opening, the subject broke free and fled on foot through the drive-through lane of the business. Officer A and Officer B immediately chased after him. As they pursued the suspect, Officer A issued multiple commands for him to show his hands. The officers were aware that the situation had reached a dangerous point, especially after the attempted disarming. As the pursuit continued through the drive-through, Officer A saw the suspect produce a firearm. The presence of the weapon transformed the encounter instantly. In response to the imminent threat, Officer A fired a single shot. The shot halted the subject's movement long enough for Officer A to issue further commands. Shortly after the shot was fired, Officer A ordered the subject to the ground. This time, the subject complied. Officer A moved in and placed him in handcuffs, gaining control of the situation. With the immediate threat contained, Officer A asked whether the subject had been struck. After confirming that he had, Officer A immediately began rendering medical aid. The officers then notified dispatch that shots had been fired and requested medics to respond to the scene. Once the subject was secured in handcuffs, officers focused on providing life-saving care. Officer A continued administering first aid until medics arrived. The shooting scene was now secured, and officers prepared for medical responders while ensuring that no further threats were present in the drive-through area. Medics reached the location and took over treatment. The subject was transported to a local hospital where he was treated for non-life-threatening injuries. He was later released from the hospital after receiving medical care. Throughout the incident, no officers were injured, despite the level of physical resistance and the presence of a firearm during the pursuit. In parallel with medical response, officers notified the zone dispatcher of the weapon discharge and the need for investigative units. The shooting scene included the drive-through lane, the Impala, the officer's scout car, and the areas where the foot pursuit occurred. Each section required careful processing by investigators. The department began its review, documenting the sequence of events, the observed traffic violations on 7 Mile, the obstructed license plate, the investigative stop, the removal of occupants. Each step was analyzed in accordance with department policy and standard officer-involved shooting procedures. Investigators also interviewed the officers involved in the encounter, ensuring that their accounts matched the body-worn camera footage and the physical evidence on scene. The attempted seizure of Officer A's firearm and the suspect's own production of a firearm were key elements in establishing the threat level faced during the incident. The drive-through remained shut down as investigators worked methodically, documenting every inch of the scene. They photographed the exact positions of the officers, the path taken during the foot pursuit, and the location where the suspect's firearm was ultimately recovered. Each measurement, each marker, and each angle helped reconstruct the chain of events that unfolded within seconds. Body-worn cameras became a crucial part of this process, capturing clear recordings of the struggle inside the vehicle, the suspect's attempt to disarm an officer, the frantic chase that followed, and the moment when the suspect appeared to produce a weapon. These videos provided investigators with an unbroken timeline, frame by frame, showing how the situation escalated from a traffic stop to a dangerous confrontation. Once investigators documented everything needed, the crime scene tape came down, and the drive-through slowly reopened to the usual flow of customers and vehicles. The subject survived the injuries sustained during the encounter, and no officers were harmed throughout the incident. In the end, the event remained a stark reminder of how quickly a seemingly routine traffic stop can turn unpredictable, shifting without warning into a tense, life-threatening situation that demands split-second decisions from everyone involved.